I knew Clara's party would be a circus the moment she bought matching napkin rings, gold-plated, embossed with our initials, expensive enough to feed a small family for a week. But that wasn't the real tell. The real tell was how she kept checking her phone every 5 minutes, smirking at messages from her girlfriends like they were planning the social event of the century. My name is Gideon Vale, and I'm a strategy consultant. I solve problems for corporations that can't figure out why their brilliant plans keep failing. Usually, it's because they don't see the obvious trap right in front of them. Tonight, I was about to become the trap. Our mansion buzzed with 30 of Clara's closest acquaintances. I refused to call them friends. The renovated Victorian sprawled across 2 acres in Millbrook Heights, complete with a finished basement that Clara had converted into her personal wine cellar and gossip headquarters. Every surface gleamed under the crystal chandelier she'd insisted we buy last spring. "Gideon, darling, could you grab more champagne from downstairs?" Clara's voice carried that particular tone she used when performing for an audience, sweet as honey, sharp as a blade. She stood near the marble fireplace, resplendent in a black cocktail dress that cost more than my car payment. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. At 33, Clara Whitmore was still the kind of woman who turned heads at charity galas and made other wives nervous at dinner parties. "Of course, sweetheart." I smiled and headed for the basement, already knowing this wasn't about champagne. The basement stairs creaked under my feet as I descended into Clara's domain. Wine racks lined the walls, filled with bottles she'd never drink but loved to mention at parties. The temperature was perfectly controlled, the lighting soft and warm. It was down here that Clara held her real court, intimate gatherings where reputations were dissected and social hierarchies established. I was reaching for a bottle of Dom Perignon when I heard the footsteps behind me. "Gideon?" Lydia Crane's voice made my skin crawl. Clara's best friend and self-appointed social coordinator, Lydia owned a boutique in town that catered to women with more money than sense. She was thin, sharp-featured, and had the kind of calculating intelligence that made her dangerous in small doses. "Lydia, looking for something?" She held an envelope in her manicured hands. Cream-colored, expensive paper, my name written across the front in Clara's careful script. "Clara asked me to give this to you. She wants you to open it upstairs in front of everyone." I took the envelope, feeling its weight. Not heavy enough for legal documents, too thick for a simple note. "What's the occasion?" "It's her birthday, silly." Lydia's smile was predatory. She deserves to get what she wants, don't you think? I studied her face, reading the anticipation there like a poker tell. Whatever was in this envelope, it was meant to humiliate me. A test, maybe. A game designed to put me in my place while Clara's audience watched. "Absolutely," I said. "She should get exactly what she deserves." We climbed back upstairs together, Lydia practically vibrating with excitement. The party had reached that perfect pitch of alcohol-fueled conversation where secrets felt safe and inhibitions loosened. Clara's friends clustered around the living room like a pack of well-dressed wolves. Vanessa Holt held court near the piano, regaling a small group with stories about her latest European vacation. Married to a hedge fund manager, Vanessa had perfected the art of looking bored while actually cataloging every detail for future gossip sessions. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a chignon that probably took her stylist an hour to perfect. Monica Price lounged on our imported Italian sofa, her designer heels kicked off, a glass of wine in her hand. The daughter of a pharmaceutical fortune, Monica had never worked a day in her life, but somehow always seemed to need money. She had a gambling problem that she thought nobody knew about, but I'd seen the credit card statements she left lying around when she visited. Tessa Dunn, the youngest of the group at 28, perched on the edge of an armchair like a bird ready to take flight. She played the innocent among this crowd of social predators, but I'd noticed how she always seemed to be in the right place to overhear the most interesting conversations. "Gideon," Clara's voice cut through the chatter. There you are. Come here, darling. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The room fell silent as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward me. Clara stood in the center of it all, backlit by the chandelier, looking like she was about to deliver the performance of her lifetime. Everyone, I have something special planned for tonight. She gestured toward the envelope in my hands. Gideon has a little surprise for me. I felt the weight of their attention, the anticipation crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. This was Clara's moment, her carefully orchestrated drama designed to… What? Embarrass me? Force some kind of public declaration of love? Make me beg for forgiveness for some imagined slight? Should I open it now? I asked, keeping my voice level. Please do. Clara's smile was radiant, but her eyes were cold as winter glass. I tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The words were printed in a formal font, legal-looking and official. At the top, in bold letters, Divorce Petition. The room held its collective breath. I read the document slowly, examining every line. It was obviously fake, rushed, poorly printed, and missing most of the required legal phrasing. But it was still convincing enough for what Clara wanted. This was her little trial, her attempt to make me bend in front of her friends, to prove my loyalty by dismissing the blatant forgery and declaring a love she expected to last forever. The smart play would be to laugh it off, to play along with her game. The expected response would be shock, denial, maybe even tears. Clara wanted me to beg, to make a scene, to give her friends a story they could dine out on for months. Instead, I folded the paper neatly and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Well, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. I guess that settles that. Clara's smile faltered. What? The divorce. I accept. I pulled the paper back out and offered it to her. Happy birthday, sweetheart. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Someone's wine glass clinked against a table. In the distance, I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway ticking away the seconds. Clara stared at me, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and the first stirrings of panic. This wasn't the script she'd written. This wasn't how her little drama was supposed to unfold. You can't be serious, she stammered. Why not? You clearly put a lot of thought into this. I gestured around the room. All these witnesses, the formal presentation. It seems like you've made your decision. Lydia stepped forward, her face flushed. Gideon, don't be ridiculous. It's just a test, I finished. I know. And I'm afraid I have to give it a failing grade. I walked to the front door, pausing with my hand on the antique brass handle. The room remained frozen, 30 people watching a marriage implode in real time. Enjoy the rest of the party, I said. I'll send someone for my things. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, cutting off the eruption of voices that followed. I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away from the house where I'd spent the last 5 years of my life. In my rearview mirror, I could see lights blazing in every window of the mansion. Clara's perfect party had become something else entirely, a wake for a marriage that had been on life support longer than either of us wanted to admit. But as I drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook Heights, I wasn't thinking about endings. I was thinking about beginnings, and about a lesson I'd learned in my consulting work. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Clara had just shown me exactly who she was. Now it was time to show her who I could be. The real test was just beginning. My office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the industrial district, 20 minutes from the manicured lawns of Millbrook Heights. The building housed a mix of small businesses, graphic designers, accountants, a yoga studio that played meditation music too loudly. I preferred the honest grit of this neighborhood to the polished fakery of Clara's world. Eric Martinez, my assistant, and the closest thing I had to a friend, looked up from his computer as I walked in. It was past midnight, but Eric often worked late, especially when he was debugging code for our clients. "How was the party?" he asked, then saw my face. "That bad?" "Worse." I poured myself a scotch from the bottle I kept in my desk drawer. "Clara staged a fake divorce petition in front of 30 people. Eric whistled low. "She wanted you to grovel. Publicly and pathetically." I settled into my chair and fired up my computer. Instead, I agreed to the divorce. Ouch! How'd that go over? About as well as you'd expect. I pulled up a new document and started typing. "Eric, I need you to do some research for me." Discreetly. "What kind of research?" "The kind that helps me understand exactly who my wife's friends really are." Eric leaned back in his chair, studying my face. "Gideon, what are you planning?" "Justice," I said. "Clara thinks she can humiliate me and walk away clean. She's about to learn that actions have consequences." Over the next 3 days, I threw myself into the project with the same methodical precision I used for corporate consulting. The difference was that this time, the problem I was solving was personal. I started with Lydia Crane. Her boutique, Lydia's, catered to the wives of Millbrook Heights elite. Designer dresses, imported accessories, the kind of overpriced luxury goods that made insecure women feel important. But Lydia's books didn't add up. I'd noticed discrepancies during the few times Clara had dragged me to boutique events. Lydia lived well beyond what her store should have generated, too well. Her BMW, her designer wardrobe, her frequent trips to New York. Either she was the most successful small-town boutique owner in history, or she was supplementing her income in creative ways. "Eric, I need you to run a background check on Lydia Crane. Focus on her business finances. That's going to require some creative database searches. Be creative." While Eric worked his magic with public records and business filings, I focused on Vanessa Holt. Vanessa's marriage to hedge fund manager Richard Holt was Millbrook Heights' golden couple success story. They'd been featured in the local society magazine twice, always photographed at charity events or exclusive restaurant openings. But I'd noticed things at parties. The way Vanessa's eyes wandered when Richard was talking. How she always seemed to be checking her phone. The subtle tension that crackled between them when they thought no one was watching. More importantly, I'd seen her car parked outside the Riverside Fitness Center at odd hours. Not during regular workout times, but late in the evening when the gym was supposedly closed for cleaning. "Eric, what do you know about private investigators?" "Thinking of hiring one?" "Thinking of hiring the right one." Eric's research led me to Marjorie Crane, Lydia's estranged aunt, and a retired police detective who'd opened a small PI practice after leaving the force. The irony was too perfect to ignore. Marjorie's office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. She was a compact woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that probably made suspects confess without being asked. "You want me to investigate my own niece?" she asked after I'd explained what I needed. "I want you to investigate several people. Lydia just happens to be one of them." "Why?" "Because they humiliated my wife at her birthday party, and I believe they're not who they pretend to be." Marjorie studied me for a long moment. "You know I used to be a cop, right? I can smell revenge from a mile away." "This isn't about revenge. It's about truth." "Truth." She laughed, but not unkindly. "Okay, Mr. Vale. I'll find your truth. But it's going to cost you." "How much?" $5,000, plus expenses." I wrote the check without hesitation. Marjorie delivered her first report 3 days later. Lydia was skimming from her business partners, inflating expenses and pocketing the difference. She'd been doing it for 2 years, building a nest egg that she kept in a separate account under her maiden name. "She's good at it," Marjorie admitted, "but not good enough to hide from someone who knows where to look." The Vanessa report was even more interesting. My suspicions about the fitness center were correct. She was having an affair with Jake Morrison, one of the personal trainers. Jake was 25, single, and apparently had a weakness for married women with money. They meet every Tuesday and Thursday evening, Marjorie said. Always after hours, always in his private training room. Your friend Vanessa is paying him for more than fitness advice. Monica Price's secrets were hiding in plain sight. The gambling problem I'd suspected was worse than I'd imagined. She owed money to 3 different casinos, plus a private card game that operated out of the back room of an exclusive men's club downtown. She's into them for about $200,000, Marjorie reported. Her father doesn't know yet, but that won't last long. These people don't like to wait for their money. Even Tessa Dunn, sweet, innocent Tessa, had her secrets. She was feeding information to a gossip blogger who ran an anonymous social media account called Millbrook Secrets. Every scandal, every affair, every financial indiscretion that made its way onto the blog could be traced back to conversations that happened when Tessa was present. She's been monetizing gossip for 2 years, Marjorie said. Makes about $30,000 a year selling stories about her friends. I sat in my office, surrounded by evidence of the lies and betrayals that defined Clara's inner circle. These were the women she trusted, the friends she'd chosen over our marriage. These were the people she'd enlisted to humiliate me. What's the plan? Eric asked. We're going to give them exactly what they deserve, I said. Starting with Monica. The Riverside Club was old money trying to look like older money. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs that smelled of cigars and privilege, the kind of place where handshake deals still meant something. It also housed the private card game where Monica Price was slowly destroying her inheritance. Getting inside required some creativity. Eric's cousin worked for the catering company that provided food for private events. A little cash, a borrowed uniform, and I was invisible. Just another server setting up for the evening's festivities. The card game operated in a room behind the main dining area. I watched Monica arrive at 8:30, her hands shaking slightly as she signed the register. She looked older than her 31 years, stress lines creasing her forehead, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. I waited until the game was in full swing before making my move. The room had a small service entrance that the catering staff used to deliver drinks and appetizers. While the players focused on their cards, I slipped inside and planted a small recording device under Monica's chair. The device was voice-activated and would capture everything said at the table. But more importantly, it would capture Monica's admissions about her debts, her lies to her family, and her increasingly desperate attempts to win back money she'd already lost. The next morning, I anonymously mailed copies of Monica's IOUs to her father's office. The IOUs were public record. Anyone could have obtained them with a little effort. But I made sure they arrived with a note suggesting that Monica had been lying about her gambling for months. By noon, Monica's trust fund had been frozen pending a family meeting. By evening, she was calling everyone she knew, begging for loans to cover her immediate debts. Phase 1 complete, I told Eric. How do you feel? Like I'm just getting started. Lydia's boutique occupied a prime corner location on Millbrook Heights' main shopping district. Large windows displayed the kind of clothes that cost more than most people's rent, and the interior was designed to make customers feel like they were shopping in Paris rather than suburban New England. I watched from across the street as Lydia arrived for work, her BMW pulling into the reserved parking space behind the building. She looked confident, secure in her little kingdom of overpriced fashion and social manipulation. That confidence was about to be tested. Marjorie had done excellent work documenting Lydia's embezzlement scheme. Bank records, altered invoices, a paper trail that painted a clear picture of systematic theft from her business partners. The evidence was solid enough to stand up in court, which meant it was solid enough for my purposes. I waited until Lydia was busy with a customer, Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife, trying on a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Then I walked into the shop, playing the role of a concerned husband looking for a gift. Mr. Vale. Lydia's surprise was genuine. I didn't expect to see you here. Clara's birthday was just the beginning, I said, keeping my voice friendly. I want to make sure she has everything she deserves. Lydia's smile was uncertain. Of course. What did you have in mind? Something special. Something that shows I understand exactly who she is. While we talked, I palmed a small envelope and slipped it between two dress boxes on the counter. The envelope contained copies of Lydia's altered invoices and a note suggesting that someone should investigate the boutique's finances more carefully. I bought an expensive scarf, Clara's favorite color, and left with Lydia none the wiser. The envelope was discovered 3 hours later when Lydia's business partner, Patricia Wong, came by to review the quarterly numbers. Patricia was a retired accountant who'd invested in the boutique as a favor to Lydia, but still kept a sharp eye on the books. Marjorie called me with updates throughout the afternoon. Patricia confronted Lydia around 2 o'clock. Lots of shouting, threats about lawyers and criminal charges. Lydia tried to deny everything, but the evidence is pretty convincing. What's Patricia's next move? She's calling an emergency meeting with their lawyer tomorrow morning. My guess is Lydia has about 24 hours before this becomes a police matter. I felt a surge of satisfaction. 1 down, 3 to go. Vanessa's affair required a more delicate touch. Her husband Richard was a proud man who valued his reputation above almost everything else. A public scandal would destroy him professionally and personally, which meant it would destroy Vanessa as well. The key was timing and presentation. Tuesday evening, I positioned myself in the parking lot of Riverside Fitness Center with a camera equipped with a telephoto lens. Vanessa arrived at 7:15, using her key to enter through the staff entrance. Jake Morrison's car was already there, a red Mustang convertible that screamed midlife crisis. I waited patiently, camera ready. At 8:30, they emerged together. Vanessa's hair was mussed, her lipstick gone, her clothes wrinkled in ways that told a clear story. Jake walked her to her car, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The kiss they shared before she drove away was passionate and unguarded. They thought they were safe in the empty parking lot, hidden from the judgment of Millbrook Heights society. They were wrong. I had a dozen clear photos of their affair, plus time-stamped evidence of their regular meetings, but photos alone weren't enough. I needed Richard to discover the truth in a way that would maximize the impact. The solution came to me while reviewing Tessa's file. Sweet, innocent Tessa, who sold gossip to Millbrook Secrets, had been documenting Vanessa's affair for weeks, waiting for the right moment to monetize the information. I created an anonymous email account and sent Tessa's evidence directly to Richard Holt's work address. The email was simple and direct. Your wife is cheating on you. Tuesdays and Thursdays at Riverside Fitness. Check her phone records if you don't believe me. Richard was the kind of man who demanded proof before acting. He would investigate, discover the truth, and then respond with the methodical precision that had made him successful in finance. The explosion came Thursday evening. Marjorie called me at home with the details. Richard showed up at the fitness center with a private investigator and a divorce attorney. Caught them in the act, so to speak. Vanessa tried to claim it was just personal training, but the evidence was pretty overwhelming. How's she handling it? Not well. She's been calling everyone she knows, trying to spin the story. Claims Richard hired someone to seduce her, that it's all a setup. Nobody's buying it. By Friday morning, Vanessa was the talk of Millbrook Heights. Her marriage was over, her social standing destroyed, her comfortable life reduced to whispered gossip in coffee shops and country club locker rooms. 2 down. Tessa's punishment required a different approach. She'd built her little side business on betraying the trust of people who considered her a friend. The poetic justice was obvious. She needed to experience betrayal firsthand. I spent a week studying the Millbrook Secrets blog, learning its patterns and style. Tessa was clever about disguising her sources, but she had tells. Certain phrases she used, specific details that could only have come from someone present at private conversations. Using the evidence Marjorie had gathered, I created a comprehensive dossier on Tessa's gossip operation. Names, dates, specific stories she'd sold, bank records showing payments from the blog's advertising revenue. Then I packaged it all in an anonymous email and sent it to every person who'd been featured in one of her stories. The response was swift and brutal. Tessa found herself cut off from every social circle in town. Invitations dried up, phone calls went unanswered. Former friends crossed the street to avoid speaking to her. Within a week, she was as isolated as a plague victim. But the real masterpiece was what happened when Clara's circle began to collapse. I watched from a distance as the friendship network that had defined Clara's social identity disintegrated. Lydia was too busy dealing with criminal charges to maintain her role as social coordinator. Vanessa was fighting a vicious divorce battle that consumed all her time and energy. Monica had disappeared entirely, reportedly checking into a rehabilitation facility to deal with her gambling addiction. Tessa was persona non grata, shunned by everyone who'd once sought her company. Clara found herself increasingly isolated, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She tried to maintain her social schedule, but invitations became scarce. The charity committees that had once competed for her participation suddenly had no openings. The restaurant reservations that had always been available were mysteriously booked. I knew she was struggling because she started calling me. The first call came 2 weeks after her birthday party. I let it go to voicemail. "Gideon, we need to talk. This whole divorce thing has gotten out of hand. Call me back." The second call was more desperate. "People are asking questions about us, about what happened at the party. I need you to help me fix this." The third call was angry. "You're being ridiculous. Whatever game you're playing, it needs to stop. I'm not going to let you destroy my reputation over some stupid misunderstanding." I never called her back. Instead, I prepared for the final phase of my plan. Clara had orchestrated my humiliation as a test, expecting me to fail publicly and beg for forgiveness. Now it was time to give her a test of her own. And unlike her amateur theatrical production, mine was going to be graded on a curve. Clara's desperation manifested in predictable ways. When the phone calls failed to get my attention, she escalated to more direct methods. She showed up at my office on a Wednesday afternoon, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine despite the stress lines around her eyes. "We need to talk," she announced, sweeping past Eric's desk without acknowledgement. "Mrs. Vale?" Eric said carefully. "Mr. Vale is in a client meeting." "I'll wait." She settled into one of the chairs in our small reception area, crossing her legs and fixing Eric with the kind of stare that had once made waiters apologize for things that weren't their fault. I watched through my office window as she sat there for 2 hours, her composure gradually cracking. Finally, she stormed out, but not before leaving a message that Eric dutifully transcribed. "She says you have 24 hours to call her, or she's going to make things very difficult for you." Define difficult. She mentioned something about your reputation and how quickly things can change in a small town. I had to admire Clara's instincts. She'd realized that her social circle was under attack and correctly identified me as the most likely suspect. What she hadn't figured out was how to prove it or how to fight back effectively. Her first attempt at retaliation was clumsy but potentially dangerous. Eric discovered it during his regular security check of our office systems. Someone had tried to hack into our client database, attempting to access confidential information about our consulting contracts. "The attack came from a coffee shop downtown," Eric reported. "Whoever did it wasn't very sophisticated, but they knew enough to try covering their tracks." "Clara?" "More likely someone she hired. The timing matches up with her visit yesterday." Clara's plan was obvious in hindsight. If she could access our client files, she could look for anything embarrassing or potentially damaging to my business. Corporate consulting involved a lot of sensitive information, financial projections, strategic plans, personnel decisions that companies preferred to keep private. But Eric had built our security systems with paranoid precision. The attempted hack triggered automatic alerts and backup protocols that preserved evidence of the intrusion while preventing any actual data theft. "Should we report this to the police?" Eric asked. "Not yet. Let's see what else she has planned." Clara's next move was more sophisticated. She'd apparently learned from the failed hacking attempt and decided to attack my reputation through more traditional channels. The Whisper campaign started at the Millbrook Heights Country Club, where Clara still maintained her membership despite her social isolation. She began spreading rumors about my consulting practice, suggesting that I'd been overbilling clients, that my strategic advice had led to significant losses for several companies, that my recent behavior indicated serious mental health issues. The rumors were carefully crafted to sound plausible while being impossible to definitively disprove. Clara had learned something about psychological warfare during our marriage, probably by watching me handle difficult clients. Within a week, I started receiving concerned calls from existing clients. Nothing dramatic, just subtle questions about project timelines and billing practices. The kind of inquiries that suggested someone had been raising doubts about my professional competence. "She's good at this," I admitted to Eric. "Better than I expected." "What's the plan?" "We document everything and wait for her to overreach. Clara's problem is that she's never learned when to stop." The overreach came sooner than expected. Clara had recruited Mason Dorsey, her personal trainer and obvious rebound relationship, to help with the more physical aspects of her campaign. Mason was 28, built like a fitness magazine cover model, and possessed the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never having his assumptions seriously challenged. He showed up at my office on a Friday evening, timing his visit for when the building would be mostly empty. Eric had already left for the day, and I was alone, finishing up some client reports. "Gideon Vale?" Mason's voice carried the kind of forced casualness that preceded violence. "That's me." "We need to talk about Clara." Mason was dressed in expensive workout gear that showed off his physique to maximum advantage. He'd probably spent an hour in the gym before coming here, pumping himself up for this confrontation. "What about her?" "She's been going through a rough time lately. Her friends are having problems. Her marriage is falling apart. She thinks you might be involved. Her marriage fell apart when she decided to humiliate me in front of 30 people. As for her friends, maybe they should have thought about consequences before they helped plan that little drama." Mason stepped closer, using his size to intimidate. "You need to back off. Clara doesn't deserve whatever you're doing to her." "What exactly do you think I'm doing?" "Don't play stupid. Lydia's business problems, Vanessa's divorce, Monica disappearing, that's not coincidence." I had to respect Clara's deductive reasoning. She'd connected the dots correctly, even if she couldn't prove anything. "You're suggesting I somehow caused all of their problems?" "I'm saying the problems started after you walked out of that party. Clara thinks you're trying to destroy her life." "Clara destroyed her own life when she decided to test our marriage like it was a game show." Mason's face flushed with anger. "She was trying to get your attention. You'd been ignoring her for months, treating her like she didn't matter. She wanted to know if you still cared enough to fight for the marriage. So she staged a fake divorce and tried to humiliate me publicly? She wanted you to choose her over your pride. Instead, I chose self-respect over manipulation." Mason took another step forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne and see the vein pulsing in his neck. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop whatever you're doing to Clara and her friends. You're going to apologize for embarrassing her at the party, and you're going to give her the divorce she wants with a fair settlement. Or what? Or I'll make you." The threat was clear, but Mason had made a crucial error. We were in my office, surrounded by security cameras that Eric had installed after a break-in attempt 2 years earlier. Everything was being recorded in high definition, including Mason's escalating threats. "Are you threatening to assault me, Mr. Dorsey? I'm explaining reality. The reality is that you're a personal trainer who's sleeping with a married woman and making threats against her husband. How do you think that's going to play with your other clients? With your employer? With your girlfriend? Mason's confidence wavered slightly. What girlfriend? Jennifer Walsh, 26, works at the bank downtown. You've been dating for 8 months. She thinks you're exclusive. The color drained from Mason's face. How do you know about Jennifer? The same way I know about the apartment you can't afford, the car payments you're behind on, and the reason you started sleeping with Clara in the first place. I smiled. You needed money, and she needed someone to make her feel young and desirable. It's a business arrangement disguised as romance. You're insane. I'm thorough, and you're in over your head. Mason stood there for a moment, processing the implications of what I'd told him. Then his anger overrode his common sense, and he lunged forward, grabbing my shirt with both hands. You think you're so smart? The office door opened behind him. Mr. Vale? Marjorie Crane stepped into the room, taking in the scene with a cop's trained eye. Am I interrupting something? Mason released my shirt and stepped back, his face cycling through anger, embarrassment, and calculation. We were just finishing, I said calmly. Mr. Dorsey was leaving. Mason looked between Marjorie and me, realizing that whatever advantage he'd thought he had was gone. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said, and if you come near my office again, I'll have you arrested for harassment and assault. After Mason left, Marjorie settled into one of my client chairs and pulled out a small notebook. Friend of yours? Clara's new boyfriend. He came to deliver a message. What kind of message? The kind that's going to cost him his job, his girlfriend, and his reputation. I forwarded the security footage to Jennifer Walsh's work email, along with photos of Mason and Clara together and a detailed timeline of their affair. I also sent copies to Mason's employer at the fitness center, along with a formal complaint about his unprofessional conduct. By Monday morning, Mason had lost both his job and his girlfriend. By Tuesday, he'd moved out of his apartment, unable to afford the rent without Clara's financial support. Clara's last ally was gone, and her attempts at retaliation had only made her situation worse. But I wasn't finished with her yet. The final act was about to begin. 4 months after Clara's birthday disaster, I received an interesting phone call from her attorney. Mr. Vale, this is David Patterson from Patterson Wells and Associates. I represent your wife in the divorce proceedings. What can I do for you, Mr. Patterson? Mrs. Vale would like to discuss a settlement. She's prepared to be quite reasonable about the division of assets. How reasonable? She's willing to accept a 50-50 split of all marital property, including the house. She's also prepared to waive any claim to spousal support. I almost laughed. 6 months ago, Clara would have demanded 70% of everything plus permanent alimony. Her newfound generosity was a measure of how desperate she'd become. I'll consider it, I said, but I'd like to discuss the terms with Clara directly, face to face. I'm not sure that's advisable. It's necessary. Tell Clara I'll meet her at the house tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock. Patterson tried to object, citing the potential for emotional confrontation and the benefits of handling everything through attorneys. But Clara overruled him, probably because she was still clinging to the hope that she could manipulate me in person. I arrived at the mansion exactly on time. Clara had dressed carefully for the occasion, a simple black dress that emphasized her figure without being too obvious about it. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled to look casually elegant. She was still beautiful, still capable of turning heads and making men forget their better judgment. But I was no longer one of those men. Thank you for coming, she said, leading me to the living room where we'd hosted so many parties. Would you like something to drink? I'm fine. The house felt different, emptier somehow, despite being filled with the same expensive furniture and artwork we'd accumulated during our marriage. The life had gone out of it, leaving behind an expensive shell that looked impressive, but felt hollow. David says you're willing to discuss a settlement. I want this to be over, Gideon. The last few months have been difficult. For both of us. Clara sat across from me, crossing her legs in a gesture that was both unconscious and calculated. I know you're angry about the birthday party. I understand that now. It was a mistake. It was a test, and I failed it, according to your scoring system. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I was trying to save our marriage. By staging a fake divorce in front of 30 people? Clara's composure cracked slightly. I was scared, Gideon. Scared that you didn't love me anymore. Scared that we were just going through the motions. I wanted to force a conversation about what we both wanted. So you enlisted your friends to help you ambush me. They thought they were helping, Lydia said. Clara stopped herself, realizing that mentioning Lydia was a mistake. Lydia said what? That humiliating me would somehow fix our marriage? She said that sometimes men need to be shocked into paying attention. And what did Vanessa say? Or Monica? Or sweet little Tessa? Clara's face went pale. You know. I know everything. About Lydia's embezzlement. About Vanessa's affair. About Monica's gambling debts and Tessa's gossip blog. I know that your circle of friends is built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. You destroyed them. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. I exposed them. There's a difference. Lydia is facing criminal charges. Vanessa lost everything in her divorce. Monica had a nervous breakdown. Tessa can't show her face anywhere in town. And you think I'm responsible for their choices? Clara stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked our perfectly manicured garden. I think you orchestrated their downfall to punish me. I think they orchestrated their own downfall by living lies and assuming there would never be consequences. You're not God, Gideon. You don't get to judge people and destroy their lives. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped protecting them from the truth. Clara turned back to face me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely vulnerable. What about us? What about our marriage? What marriage? You mean the performance we've been giving for the last 2 years? The carefully scripted social interactions designed to maintain our image as the perfect couple? It wasn't all performance. Wasn't it? When was the last time we had a real conversation, Clara? When was the last time you asked about my work, my thoughts, my feelings about anything that mattered? I cared. You cared about appearances, about maintaining your social status and your network of friends who were just as shallow and manipulative as you are. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Clara's face cycled through hurt, anger, and finally, a kind of cold calculation that I recognized from our worst arguments. Fine, she said. You want honesty? Here's honesty. You're right about our marriage. It was performance, at least for the last 2 years. Do you know why? Enlighten me. Because you stopped trying. You stopped seeing me as a woman and started seeing me as an obligation. You went through the motions of being a husband while mentally checking out of the relationship. So you decided to test my commitment by humiliating me? I decided to find out if there was anything left worth saving. And when you walked out of that party, you gave me my answer. Clara moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume and see the pain in her eyes. But you didn't just walk away, did you? You decided to destroy everything I cared about. My friends, my social life, my reputation. You wanted me to suffer. I wanted you to understand consequences. Whose consequences? Mine or theirs? It was a fair question, and one I'd been avoiding for months. Had I exposed Clara's friends because of their lies, or because they'd helped her humiliate me? Was this about justice or revenge? Both, I said finally. They chose to participate in your little drama. They chose to build their lives on deception. I just made sure those choices had appropriate results. And me? What result am I supposed to learn from this? I looked around the living room where Clara's perfect party had become a disaster, where 30 people had watched our marriage implode in real time. You're supposed to learn that actions have consequences, that people aren't chess pieces to be moved around for your entertainment, that marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a performance. And if I've learned that lesson, if I'm willing to change, then you'll do better in your next marriage. Clara's face went white. You really want the divorce? I really want the divorce. She sat down heavily, all the fight going out of her. What about the settlement? David said you'd consider. I'll take half of everything, as you suggested. But I want you to understand something, Clara. This isn't about money or property. This is about the fact that you turned our marriage into a game, and games have winners and losers. And you won. No, we both lost. The difference is that I'm willing to admit it. I stood up to leave, but Clara's voice stopped me. Gideon, for what it's worth, I am sorry. About the party, about the test, about all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know. Thank you. That means something. Does it mean enough? I looked at her one last time. Beautiful, broken, finally honest in a way she hadn't been for years. It means we can end this with some dignity and tact. That's more than I expected 4 months ago. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. Clara, the friends you choose next time, make sure they're actually friends, not just people who tell you what you want to hear. The door closed behind me with the same satisfying click as it had 4 months earlier. But this time, I wasn't angry or hurt or looking for revenge. This time, I was free. The last party was over, and there would be no encore performance. 6 months later, I was sitting in my office, reviewing a proposal for a new client, when Eric knocked on my door. There's someone here to see you, he said. Says it's about Clara. I looked up, curious. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago with minimal drama. Clara had kept her word about the settlement, and we'd managed to divide our assets without involving lawyers in a prolonged battle. Who is it? Tessa Dunn. I hadn't seen or heard from any of Clara's former friends since the various scandals had destroyed their social circle. Tessa had been the most thoroughly ostracized, her gossip blog having made her persona non grata throughout Millbrook Heights. Send her in. Tessa looked different. Younger somehow, less polished but more genuine. Her hair was shorter, her clothes simpler, her makeup minimal. The transformation was striking. Thank you for seeing me, she said, settling into the client chair across from my desk. What can I do for you, Tessa? I wanted to apologize, and to thank you. For what? The apology is for my part in Clara's birthday party. I knew what she was planning, and I should have tried to stop it. Instead, I went along with it because I thought it would make a good story for my blog. And the thanks? Tessa smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it looked completely genuine. For destroying my life. That's an interesting thing to be grateful for. I was living a lie, Gideon, pretending to be friends with people I didn't even like, selling their secrets for money, building my identity around gossip and manipulation. When you exposed what I was doing, it forced me to take a hard look at who I'd become. And what did you see? Someone I didn't recognize. Someone I didn't want to be. Tessa leaned forward, her expression earnest. I've spent the last 6 months rebuilding my life. I got a real job, made real friends, started dating someone who actually knows who I am. It's been the best 6 months of my adult life. I'm glad to hear that. The others aren't doing as well. Lydia's probably going to prison. Vanessa moved back in with her parents and is working as a receptionist at a dental office. Monica is still in rehabilitation, but her family has cut her off financially. And Clara? Clara moved to Boston. She's working for a small PR firm, starting over. I think she's learned some hard lessons, but she's surviving. I nodded, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sympathy. The consequences had been harsh, but not permanent. Everyone had a chance to rebuild, to do better, to learn from their mistakes. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I wanted you to know that what you did, it wasn't just revenge. It was a wake-up call, at least for some of us. After Tessa left, I sat in my office thinking about consequences and second chances, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the strange ways that destroying something can sometimes save it. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. New client consultation at 3. Tech startup looking for strategic planning. Looks promising. I smiled and got back to work. There were problems to solve, strategies to develop, futures to build. The past was finally past, and the future was whatever I chose to make it. The test was over, and this time, everyone had passed.